Go to leaders' questions.
Deputy
MaryLouMcDonald.
Agus Cian Corla, I want to offer condolences to everyone who loved Garda, Kevin Flattley, to his heartbroken wife Una and their 2 children, Aoife and Erin, his parents, his family, his friends, and of course to his colleagues within An Garda Síochána. He was a devoted father, a man with a deep bro for community, a GAA man, with his beloved club O'Dwyer's in Balbriggan. And his death is a devastating reminder of the dangers faced by the Gardaí as they keep us safe. So to Farma Cailse ag a chlan, Garda den Sco Cailse ag a Fubal, Shasan an Tír a Queen Alo. So a good man is lost to his family, a great Garda is lost to his community, and the country mourns with them. Arieste Gorev a Anam Dílish. Taoiseach, the controversy regarding unnecessary hip surgery carried out on children at CHI Hospital has deepened. The Minister for Health has now finally confirmed that parents are receiving letters about operations on children as far back as 2010. This is the first confirmation from government that this scandal goes back at least 15 years and not the 2-year period as previously asserted by government. We've been raising this issue with you and with the Taoiseach for weeks now. We did so because we had been contacted directly by parents literally at their wits' end, having received letters from CHI regarding operations their children had 15 years ago. We've been raising it with you, conscious of all of those parents who are now asking themselves, was my child operated on unnecessarily? How could this have happened? And what are the consequences now? And each time you've been questioned on this scandal, you and Simon Harris have responded with non-answers. You've refused to give clarity, and so parents have been stonewalled by CHI and stonewalled by your government. So after weeks of trying to contain the truth, we have it finally in black and white from the Minister for Health, confirmation that letters have been issued to parents of children who had operations 15 years ago. The Minister's response to Chocta David Cullinan states, letters were issued to families and patients who had hip dysplasia procedures since 2010 to provide reassurance and information, she says, about the audit and to ensure all potential cases are included. But Taoiseach, the truth is you have given neither information nor reassurance to parents. In fact, you've been ducking, diving and dodging. The Minister has now accepted that there are cases going back to 2010, which means the investigation is not limited in the way that your government had previously claimed. In fact, it stretches back 15 years at least. So if the 2021 to 2023 audit recalled 561 children, this we know, Taoiseach, can I ask you, how many children in total are subject to recall in the full look-back process? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands? What's the number, Taoiseach? The Minister for Health also says that an action plan is being prepared. She states, the plan will include identification of groups of patients not included in the audit sample, but who may be affected by any findings of the audit. Can you explain to me exactly what that means? And can you tell parents sick with worry who may be listening today what precisely all of this means for their children? Taréis den rialtas cúpla mí a cahav ag dúil tú fragri a hort, tá devnú fáite agin in is go déan an scanal modula óbrádaí ar cromón có fada siar le 5 bliain déag ó chin. Tá an éireann umlán tilse ag tiisimathóirí. Taoiseach, the parents of children caught up in this hip surgery scandal deserve answers and the full truth. Now we know that this scandal goes back 15 years at least. Can you finally tell us how many letters have been issued to parents, how many children have been recalled? Does this go back even further than 2010? How many children are involved, Taoiseach?
Thank you.
Could I at the outset, ask Cian Corla, also extend my deepest sympathies on the floor of the House to the family, friends and colleagues of Garda Kevin Flattley. Our thoughts and prayers are particularly with his wife Una and his daughters Aoife and Erin. He died in the line of duty and a reminder to us of the dangers that Garda Síochána, members of Garda Síochána go through day after day as part of their mission to keep us all safe and to prevent crime. He was an outstanding community person, as many Gardaí are. They not only give duty in the line of service, but outside of their duties as members of the Garda Síochána. They are pillars within our community, helping sporting organisations, in this case Kevin helping O'Dwyer's GA club. And we extend our sympathies to the broader force as well, all members of Garda Síochána, at what is a very difficult and traumatic time for them, and a huge blow to the force. In respect of the clinical audit that has been conducted in respect of developmental dysplasia, I think in the first instance it has to be said that there is a lot of anxiety and concern. A lot of parents would be worried because for a child to go through an operation or surgery is very traumatic for a child and very traumatic for the parents. Anything we do in here must be done with that in mind. That we're very conscious of anxiety that can be added to or created by anything we say, or by piecemeal information, or by drip feed in respect of this issue. The Minister has taken the correct decision in terms of establishing a clinical audit by an external international expert on surgery for children with developmental dysplasia of the hip across the CHI and the National Orthopaedic Hospital in Kappa. And as you know, that audit was carried out after concerns were raised that different standards and surgical practices were being used for DDH in CHI Temple Street and Kappa. And the purpose was to assess whether the standards and surgical practice used at CHI and Kappa were in keeping with international standards of practice. Concerns had been initially raised under a protected disclosure in September of 2023, and the department was notified on the 9th of May of 2024. There was some delay to the starting of the audit as the surgeon who had originally agreed to carry out the audit was no longer able to, and therefore it was necessary to secure the expertise of another paediatric surgeon. The clinical audit has been carried out or was conducted on a randomised sample of patients aged 1 to 7 years of age who had these procedures from 2021 to 2023 in CHI and indeed in Kappa. The audit process is now at a very advanced stage. It's understood that the audit author has received final feedback and fact-checking from the clinicians to whom the draft report was circulated. We all know that is standard procedure in respect of audits of this kind. We don't have a final timeline in terms of from the HSE or the CHI on when the report will be fully complete and provided to the Minister. Now, pending completion of the audit report and as a patient safety precaution, all DDH cases are now being reviewed by a single team of clinicians from CHI and Kappa before any decision for surgery is made, and this process has been in place since July of March 2005. You're correct, an action plan is currently being drafted in advance of the final audit report, and this plan includes the identification of groups of patients not included in the audit sample but who may be affected by any findings of the audit. And plans are being put in place for patient follow-up in line with good practice, and will of course consider any recommendations with regard to clinical follow-up from the final report. And CHI and Kappa have issued letters in recent weeks to families and patients who have had hip dysplasia procedures since 2010 to provide reassurance and information about the audit and to ensure all potential cases. Those letters went out after media reporting of a draft audit report. It was found necessary after that to communicate to parents as a result of a draft report. The Minister can't comment on that because the Minister hasn't received a report. And it's critical that the Minister would get that because, and we can go back later in the last minute, but the fundamental point here is no one's ducking and diving or dodging anything, and it's unfair to suggest that. We want completion. It's far better for everybody that the complete report is issued and published, and then we can
Thank you,
act on
Deputy McDonald.
So the anxiety of these parents could not be overstated. As you've correctly noted, Taoiseach, the initial sample between 2021 and 2023 was children between the ages of 1 and 7. These are very, very young children, and the idea of any small child being operated on unnecessarily is extremely traumatising for their parents. But their anxiety has been added to by your absolute lack of clarity and even now, today, your refusal to answer just basic questions of information. How many letters have been issued and how many children are involved? The parents concerned want to know that. The system wrote to these parents. They have raised this issue with these parents for their children and in these families. And now, having raised the issue, no clarity is given. No reassurance has been given, Taoiseach. That's the truth. So can we start the process of clarity today? Can you simply tell me how many letters have been issued? How many children will be recalled? You ought to know that as Taoiseach at this stage.
If you don't mind me saying so, Deputy, I think you're being somewhat disingenuous here. Nobody's stonewalling. No one is refusing to give information. I thought the obvious thing to do, and we may have this sooner than you might think, but the obvious thing to do is to wait for the audit report to be published and given to the Minister. That's logical. Otherwise, all you're asking for is drip, bits of information here and there, which only adds to the anxiety and concern of parents. Yes, and I think, if I may, I haven't interrupted. To me, an experience tells me that when you ask someone to do an external audit, independently of politicians and of government, just let them finish their work and have the totality of their work available for us to assess and then to take action based on that. That to me would, and of course, that audit has to be shared with the public, with the parents in the first instance, and the patients. Because there is always follow-up of children who have surgery for this particular condition, and that follow-up would take place right into their teenage years, right into 14 or 15 or 16. Yeah, but when you then understand, therefore, the context,
Sorry, I ask you to conclude.
You clearly then understand the context of why letters will be written.
Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Taoiseach, I want to begin by offering my deepest condolences also to the family of the late Garda Kevin Flattley, to his wife Una, his children Aoife and Éireann, and indeed his entire community and his colleagues in Garda Síochána. And on behalf of the Labour Party, just to pay tribute to Garda Flattley, to the dangerous work that he and all his colleagues do in frontline policing. We all owe them an enormous debt to keep our communities safe, and I think we all think of that as we hear the awful news of his tragic death. Could I also, Taoiseach, express sympathies to the families of the 2 young boys who died so tragically in drowning incident in Buncrana, County Donegal, to the families of Emmanuel, Familola, and to the family of Matt Sibanda, because again, I think that those tragedies really brought home to us the dangers of water, posed by water, by the risk of drowning across the country. Taoiseach, to have just one home lying vacant during a housing crisis is unforgivable, but the level of vacancy and dereliction in Ireland today is an outright scandal. Approximately 160,000 homes are lying empty across the state, or rather we think that that's the number lying empty, because the truth, Taoiseach, is that we simply don't know. On every street in every town, we see vacant buildings, vacant houses, voids, which are visual evidence of the failure of government housing policy. And I think we were all reminded of it yesterday with the news of a collapse of a terrace of Victorian cottages in my own home area, just along the Grand Canal, as morning commuters travelled to work and to school. A terrace of houses, ironically owned by and right adjacent to the Construction Industry Federation headquarters, they collapsed. Embarrassing for the CIF, for sure, but lucky that nobody was injured in the collapse. And of course, emergency services had to be called to clean up the mess. But Taoiseach, that's just one very stark example of the scourge of vacancy and dereliction. And vacancy blights more than just streetscapes, because whenever I raise it in this House, and I've raised it many times, I see vacant stairs from government. Nobody in government who seems to know the scale of the problem. You simply don't know how many empty homes there are in the country, and the already minuscule tax on those homes is not being paid by those who are sitting on them and failing to put them to use. The lengthy bureaucratic compulsory purchase process has been simply ineffective to tackle this issue. And it's not as though it's an issue that has just crept up on you. You should by now have worked out how to find out the scale of the problem and, crucially, how to tackle it. Yet 5 years since Fianna Fáil took on the housing brief, no one in government is showing any ambition to get to grips with the problem of vacant homes. So we get vacant stairs, vacant ministerial offices, vacant government policies. We're told the CSO are researching the extent of vacancy over past years, and that will be welcome. What we don't know is how your government's going to use that information. Weeks ago, my colleague Deputy Conor Sheehan asked a parliamentary question, asking the Housing Department to explain why vacancy has not been tracked, but that portion of the question was unanswered. So Taoiseach, I'm asking you, when will we see the Housing Department take on the basic task of determining how many homes are lying empty, and when will we hear from the Minister for Housing as to the plans to tackle dereliction and vacancy and to supply local authorities with adequate funding so that they can take on this task?
Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, I would disagree with you in terms of your analysis of the government's response to vacancy and to dereliction. I mean, the Vacant Homes Action Plan Progress Report 2025 highlighted the breadth of action government is actually taking to support bringing vacant properties back into use as homes. Key areas of progress include a successful delivery of the Vacant Property Refurbishment Grant, with over 11,300 applications received, 7,700 approvals, and over 1,400 grants issued as refurbishment works are completed. That amounts to €77 million paid out to support people bringing empty dwellings back into use as homes. And I've seen it all over the country. I've seen villages that had 3 or 4 derelict properties, now without any derelict properties, because people have availed of the derelict grants. Very innovative approach that was taken by the last government. Mr. Darragh O'Brien introduced it. I was a strong supporter of it, and believe it is a game changer in respect of a lot of derelict properties, the length and breadth of the country. The vacant house grant as well is quite significant, facilitating again the return of vacant houses into viable homes for people. The latest available vacancy data is from the Geo-Directory in Q4 2024, noting a decrease in the national vacancy rate to 3.8%, which is the lowest recorded since 2013. And there are different data sources. Point is taken on that, but the overall trend is downwards and vacancy levels are reducing. I think the standard answer today is more and more funding for everything. But my own view is we had given substantial funding in around 2020, 21, 22 to local authorities to deal with voids, their own voids, for example, the local authority housing stock. And local authorities take too long to release a home that has been vacated. Many homes are vacated 1 week. Families leave for a different reason, whatever, they move on. It can take sometimes months or a year for the local authority to fill the same house again. And they cite all sorts of reasons, and it's not good enough. And now they're looking for more and more grants to fill those. Voids should be filled fairly quickly within a week or two of a house being vacated, unless there's some structural issue. In the majority of cases, there aren't structural issues because families would have been living in them already. And we need to keep pressure on too where it matters. By all means, resources will be released. The resources being released into social housing, from voids to new builds to acquisitions, is a way above and beyond anything allocated in the last decade. There's no argument about that. But equally, there shouldn't be an argument about local authorities also having a razor-like focus on dereliction within their own domains. There is a Derelict Sites Act. They should use it and enforce it. And they should also make sure that voids that come under their remit should be filled quickly.
Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, we of course support any initiatives that will help to tackle the scourge of vacancy and dereliction, but it's simply not good enough for you as Taoiseach, for you as leader of a party that has held the housing brief for 5 years, to simply pass the buck to local authorities. That's not good enough. And you speak of a razor-like focus on tackling vacancy and dereliction. That's exactly what we're not seeing from your government and your housing minister. We're seeing an absolute vacancy in terms of policies. We're seeing, when we're hearing from our councillors across the country, that the resources available to local authorities to tackle voids, those resources are diminishing. Central government is undermining the capacity of local authorities to tackle vacancy and dereliction. We in Labour have supported local communities in bringing forward reports of vacant and derelict buildings and houses to local authorities so that we can help to be part of the solution to the problem. But what we're hearing from our communities is immense frustration at delays in the process, at slowness of response, and crucially at lack of funding from central government for local authorities. So it's not good enough for you to say local authorities aren't doing enough. The impetus and the driving focus must come from central government and from the housing department, and that's precisely what we're not seeing at present, and it's really symptomatic, it's really evidenced by the sort of collapse of derelict buildings that we saw so graphically yesterday.
Ní an tíim leat an écar níl an cearta agat. Na drónta sí atá ann anois ní rád ann riamh ó thaobh tuí atá fulamh agus mar sin de agus léir sin ón méid daoine atá ag fáil drónta sí sa látá nómh. I don't agree with you, Deputy. The refurbishment grant for derelict buildings wasn't there 4 years ago. It's had a very significant impact. You should be good enough to acknowledge that. It has had impact. And I remember the only criticism was that some TV programme started giving the detail of the grants, and it was considered to be politically wrong to do that, to let the public know that you can avail of a grant if you want to buy out a derelict building or refurbish a derelict building or indeed a vacant house. They've been spectacularly successful. We need more of it. But equally, some local authorities have been good in respect of social housing. Others haven't been, Deputy. And we need to call that out. And we need to call that out. And it's not always about hands out. I mean, I can go around certain local authority estates and see six vacant houses. They don't need millions to put those houses back into use. They should never be vacant for beyond a month. And I've been saying this to local, I'm not saying this now, I've said this to local authorities time and time again. We took void initiative after void initiative, but dependency culture kicks in. We'll fill a void if you give us 50 grand or 60. No. If a house is idle because someone has left it a month ago, have it allocated again.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Because we are in a housing crisis.
Last to conclude, Deputy Cian O'Callaghan.
On behalf of the Social Democrats, I want to join in extending our deepest sympathies to the friends, colleagues and family of Garda Kevin Flattley. Garda Kevin Flattley lost his life while serving the community to keep us safe. And our thoughts are with all those mourning this terrible loss, and with his wife Una and his children Aoife and Aaron. Taoiseach, the state is continuing to fail children with additional needs. All over the country there are hundreds of children who don't have a school place or an appropriate place. The damage that this is doing to children, to their development and their well-being is unforgivable, and the stress and the anxiety that this is causing families is incalculable. Now a number of families have been forced to take legal action against the state over its failure to provide their children with an education. One mother who has taken a case has an 8-year-old child with autism who has never attended school. In a sworn statement, she told the High Court, "The sad truth is that if I never sent my son to school, nobody would know and nobody would care." Taoiseach, the really awful thing is that this mother is right. Children with additional needs do not enjoy an automatic right to education. Every year, hundreds of them fight to get a school place. Their parents must beg, plead and cajole and ultimately take legal cases to vindicate their rights. Also, their children can get a place in a classroom. And still, despite these efforts, they are often unsuccessful. This relentless battle with the state, which should be there to support these families, is all-consuming, draining and exhausting. It's bringing many parents to the brink. Taoiseach, successive governments have promised to address this scandal. But still, children with additional needs are not just failed, they are consciously failed. The state either doesn't care enough to provide appropriate school places or lacks the competence to do so. These families are not looking for special treatment. They just want their children to have the same rights as other children in this state. They want to be able to learn and develop to their maximum potential. They want them to be able to enjoy the routine and activities of a school day. And they want them to be able to socialise and make friends with other children. This is all that they are asking for, Taoiseach. Families with children who have additional needs are fed up of platitudes, they are fed up of broken promises, they want to see action. Taoiseach, can you tell me, will the state be fighting these cases from families that are now before the courts? And can you give a commitment that every child in this country will have an appropriate school place in September?
Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, every child has a constitutional right to an education. And it's our job as a government to vindicate that right. And I don't accept your presentation that government doesn't care. Government does care. And I would say to you that there's evidence for that. And I don't want to go through all the statistics, that doesn't console a particular parent, a particular family who is having difficulty getting confirmation of a school place for next September. But just to say to you that expenditure has increased exponentially in the special education area, and rightly so. It's now about 28% of the education budget, a 48% increase since 2020. We now have about 124 special schools, with 11 open since 2020. There had been a lapse before 2020, but since 2020 we've opened new special schools and built them, 11 of them, and 5 more are opening in 2025, 2026. The number of children attending special classes in mainstream schools has doubled over the past 5 years, from just over 9,000 in 2019 to almost 19,000 in 2024, with 3,335 special classes now in place to support them. Now, in terms of this year, we are planning a substantial number of school places for this year. About 3,900 places will be available for about 3,275 students known to the NCSE seeking special class and special school places through additional capacity. Now, there is a challenge, and intensive work is ongoing, because I've been in touch with Minister Michael Moynihan, Special Education Minister, and Minister Helen McEntee in terms of this issue, particularly in the Dublin area, in terms of endeavouring to, if you like, confirm and get specific confirmation around students who have yet to get a place confirmed. And some of the issues are around getting either the sanctioned special classes up and ready before September. They will definitely be provided, as in they've been sanctioned, but now the logistics of getting, in some cases it could be porta cabins, in some cases it could be getting new facilities in place. But no effort will be spared to prevent anyone, in other words, to get a place rather than having someone to try and seek to vindicate their rights in court. Don't want that. There has been a very significant increase in terms of children presenting with special needs and additional needs. And the work is ongoing also in terms of the NCSE and the department getting far better at predicting and having databases for the future through the National Council for Special Education, and that the application dates come forward earlier in the year, and that we'd have a common application system nationally for children with additional needs. But this issue is being given absolute intense attention by the government right now to give that assurance to parents.
Deputy O'Callaghan.
Thanks, Taoiseach, for your response. Taoiseach, families have heard these promises before, and there's a world of difference between a sanctioned classroom and a classroom that actually opens in September. A child can't go to school in a classroom that's just sanctioned, has to be up and running. No family should have to fight to get an education for their child, and no parent should have to take legal action against the state to vindicate this right. Taoiseach, there's 399 new special education classrooms that have been sanctioned for the next school year. How many of these will actually be open in September, Taoiseach? And Taoiseach, will the state, you didn't answer me, will the state be fighting these cases that have been taken by parents and families? And can you give a commitment that every child will have an appropriate school place in September?
Taoiseach.
As I said, 399, you're correct, new special classes for the next year have already been sanctioned in the last month. That's done much earlier than previous years. I don't have a detailed report in terms of each particular class. Many there are no difficulty with, some there are, in terms of the logistics of getting them built or getting modular buildings in place, or in terms of planning. But again, I'm working with and in touch with the Minister for Education, Minister Helen McEntee, and Minister Michael Moynihan. They're working extremely hard on this issue with the National Council for Special Education. Elaine Ores Fishin, Tigamid Gwil Brew Ertish Mahori, Tigamid Gwil Gergod, the Reintuko, Agus Neil Shekrin Fos, the Reintuko Gwil Oitna Ako, Mi Manfor, Octomi the end of Gache or Nihil, Kun Gave Sauce to Meg, the Oitna own man for Shakoin. So we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure that every child has a place next September and certainly has visibility in respect of a place in the next school year. And we'll be flat out to make sure that becomes a reality.
Deputy Peadar Toibin.
Taoiseach, I too want to offer my deepest sympathies and the sympathies of Ain to the family of Kevin Flattley. This is a disaster for Kevin's families and friends, and it's also a disaster for the state that 90 Gardaí have lost their lives in the line of duty since the foundation of the state. Many families fear when their parent or their loved one goes out to work that they mightn't see them back, and yet those families still commit to going out and working for our safety on a daily basis. Taoiseach, in terms of the healthcare system, on a daily basis, families are struggling to get healthcare for their children. And the dysfunction in the healthcare system is leading to enormous delays and enormous difficulties for those families. And here we have a situation where families actually manage to get operations for their children. And we find out that in many cases those operations were unwarranted and unnecessary. It is a major problem currently within the state that we have children who may not have had reached the threshold in terms of hip surgery, or maybe didn't suffer from hip dysplasia in the first place, having potentially operations carried out on themselves. I understand as well that currently in the audit over the last 2 years, there's about 561 people have been included in that particular audit. But if the audit is going back 15 years, on those terms, we could be talking about thousands of parents and children who will be part of this particular audit. I myself had to leave a son in an operating theatre for a procedure not as serious as the ones that we're talking about at the moment, but I saw the fear in his eyes before I left the theatre, and I also felt very difficult in leaving that location. But you can imagine the fury that must exist amongst the thousands of parents who left their children in very difficult circumstances in a situation where potentially those operations were not necessary, where potentially those operations could have damaged those individual children. All operations have challenges. Infections are possible. Surgical trauma is possible. You know, it's a very serious issue putting a young child under an anaesthetic in this country. Now, today, potentially thousands of parents have been left in limbo. And for many, there is an excruciating absence of information. And this is the real difficulty for them. The questions they want to know is, how did this happen? How can hospitals carry out a particular operation at a rate of 5 to 10 times more than the population of that country needs? And nobody seemed to be able to pick up on it. What are the government's structures that allowed this? Where is the leadership in the particular hospitals that this happened? What is the culture that facilitates this? And where was the CHI and Ministers for Health over those 15 years? The Department of Health are responsible for all those aspects of our health services. You know, the idea that, you know, we are asking parents to be confident today Deputy. In relation to what's happening to their children today, yet we cannot tell them what happened for the last 15 years to the children. And if the idea of this audit Deputy. Is to try and make sure that this never happens again, surely there's an urgency to make sure that that audit is complete ASAP. When will parents know what happened to the children?
Thank you, Deputy, for raising the issue. And could I just, in line with Deputy Bacik, and I omitted to do it earlier, to also express our deepest sympathies to Emmanuel, the family of Emmanuel Famiola, and the family of Matt Sabanda and the community in Donegal for the very, very sad, shocking drownings over the weekend. Two young teenagers with their friends enjoying themselves, which made for a very, very sad weekend altogether. Could I say, in respect of the issues raised by the Deputy, the audit is not going back 15 years. The audit that's currently being conducted is a random anonymised sample of patients aged 1 to 7 years from 2021 to 2023. Now, letters have issued from CHI and CAPA to parents, but that's not an audit. Letters have issued. The actual clinical audit by the external author is, as I've just described. And we do really need to await the completion of that audit. I do accept the concerns, and I appreciate that the absence of completion here or information can compound anxiety for parents. And that is why it's important that we get the complete audit and that we are in a position to share it with the parents, with the families, and indeed with the Oireachtas also and the public at large. And then that an action plan would then be implemented and published also to deal with that and to work with parents and with patients. Again, I can't draw conclusions until I see the final report, until the Minister sees the final report. But again, the implications are disturbing if indeed some of the assertions come home to be the case. In other words, or emerge to be truthful. I think there are issues already, as I've outlined in an earlier reply. Changes to practice and protocols has occurred in terms of multidisciplinary approach, in terms of preoperative assessment, and you know that clearly wasn't there, it seems, in advance of this. Cases are now being reviewed by a single team of clinicians from CHI and CAPA before a decision for surgery is made, and that process has been in place since early March of 2025. And of course, as I said earlier, in many cases, if a child is operated, say as far back as 2010, that child would still be getting checkups right through to the teenage years as well. As up to 14, 15 years of age, one would be getting, routinely would have follow-up in respect of such surgeries, and indeed other surgeries as well. That's not uncommon. But until we get the report complete, and I think I favour the completion approach. In other words, get the full audit out, get it published, get it shared, we can act on it then.
Deputy Toibin.
See, Taoiseach, there are major problems within the health service that you can act on now that have led in part to the difficulties that we're suffering. You know, there isn't proper data collection in Irish health service at the moment. There isn't a proper digital patient number within the health service. We don't have a good register of information currently within the health service. The capture of outcomes is not valued within the health service. We don't actually track patients in a similar fashion that other jurisdictions do to be able to flag these situations if they should arise at all. So fixing those particular issues would actually extremely benefit patients within the system and make sure that these issues don't happen in the future. And actually that idea that we would actually start to track and maybe even pay hospitals for their activities and for their outcomes instead of the manner that hospitals are paid now would be beneficial to making sure that money doesn't get lost in the front line and get caught up in layers of administration as well. The worry I have at the moment is right now, have all parents who potentially could be caught up in this particular scandal in the last 15 years, have all of those parents been contacted? What is the depth of information that they have received? Is it a generic letter, or have they been given specific information to their own cases?
Thank you, Deputy Toibin.
Could I first of all say that in relation to your general comments, I mean, a lot of advances have been made in our health service as well, Deputy, huge advances. And in fact, we know through the various layers of management on hospital sites now that there's huge data being collected in respect of individual patients once they enter into a hospital, once they go in for particular treatment. There's a lot of information garnered in respect of every individual patient nowadays. There is a need for further investment in digital health, electronic patient records, and we are going to allocate in the upcoming National Development Plan substantial funding in addition to that already spent in relation to that issue, because that is necessary. But the health vote at the moment in 2025 is 25.8 billion. 25.8. It is getting to the front line. Can't be that sort of superficial about it. Of course it's going to the front line. Like, we need to... Sorry, there's 25.8 billion of us allocated to health in 2025. That's 6 or 7 figures ahead of 4 or 5 years ago. We do need to, the value for money thing needs to happen as well. And there'll be another fine day you'll be in here, so on, rightly raising those issues, right? Can't have a boat way, though. So it's not always a question. And we will be allocating more to health. But we do need to analyse it as well, and we accept separately from the normal funding into acute services and tertiary services, we need investment in the digital health area.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now move on to the order of business.